Alrighty, my voice isn't as bad as it was earlier. It's still pretty bad, but I felt like going for another round. Believe it or not, we're a lot closer to the end, at least of the TV anime, than you probably even realize, and you'll see why in just a minute. You might already understand why if you remember how I explained that the list works. Anyways, picking up where we left off, Yume Kui Mary. This was a really odd show that I really wanted to like a lot more than I actually did. Because the main character girl is really cute, and the original manga is from a guy who did some really weird Toho doujinshi, not pornographic ones, but just like fun stories. And I love the like aesthetic of this show. It's got this, dark, kind of almost Burton-esque, but I don't really like Burton stuff, but like it's in that vein, but I like it. Um, it's got this weird dreamy world that the main girl comes from, and but the main guy character is really boring as they tend to be. And like as much as I appreciated Mary and her storyline, the show's kind of messy and confusing. The directing is really strange. Um, Overall, like it was one that again I really wanted to like it, so I kept watching it. But at no point did I actually think it was really good. And then I'd read a few chapters of the manga, and it seemed a lot better. And I think it's concluded, but it went on for like way longer than the anime. This is a show I probably shouldn't have finished, so I'd probably give it like a five, maybe even a four. Um, like, I just don't think it was even that good. Level E, though, is a show that I appreciate a lot. And this was the. It's an adaptation of the manga that. What's his fucking name? The dude who wrote Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter. This is what he did in between those major series. And it's pretty fucking entertaining. It's about this guy who's basically the prince of all cosmos, and he's a total troll asshole, and he comes to Earth and trolls people essentially. Now the weird thing about Level E is that at first there's sort of a main character who the prince is interacting with, but then it turns out that it's more of an arc structure show. Like it just completely switches over to different characters as it goes. Some of the stories are more entertaining than others, and then it kind of suddenly has the original main character again at the end. It's weird. The whole structure of the show is very strange, but the prince makes it all worthwhile, and the really nice production and feel of the show. This was a David production show, and I had seen it back when it came out, and I remember thinking even when I first watched it that they would be good for JoJo, and then lo and behold they ended up becoming the JoJo studio. But yeah, it's got a really cool aesthetic, great OP, and the prince is an entertaining character, but since it's pretty hit and miss on the comedy side, it's probably only a 6 or a 7 from me. Um, Likewise, Nekogami Yaoyorozu. Very similar story to Yume Kui Mary, where I wanted to like this because I love the character designs and the author had done Toho Dojins before. And this one very much like is obviously inspired by Toho. Like just the whole approach to character design and characterization is like extremely Toho-esque. Um, this was just sort of a sitcom with a bunch of gods, like Shinto gods as the main characters. That was, again, hit or miss in the comedy, but this one I remember actually getting better as it went, which was surprising because usually with comedy anime they kind of blow their load early on. This one, I remember thinking the early episodes were this or that, but then like the last stretch was actually stronger. Even then, it's not an amazing show. I'd probably give it a strong 6. I actually really wanted to translate the manga of this. I led a scanslation effort for the first chapter, but I could only get a translator. Like the translator I had only did chapter 1, and then they didn't want to continue, and nobody else picked it up. It still has not been translated. There's still just chapter 1 out there by Matiliata Scans, which is me. But yeah, I enjoyed the series. Nobody else fucking watched it or remembers it. What the hell was the English title? It was like Cat God, The Everyday Tales of a Cat God, or just Cat God. I think it's on Crunchyroll, or was, but I'm not sure. Seikon no Quasar 2. It's more Quasar. Season 2, I remember I was kind of iffy on it, because it's even raunchier than Season 1, but to the point where it's just porn. And it was, like, almost less funny because of it. Like, the actual story wasn't as good, and it was kind of weird and out of left field. Because season 1 kind of has like a concrete ending, and season 2 is just like a totally different story using the same characters. It was weird, but it's still a good time. It's probably like a 8, maybe a 7, if I'm being honest. Usagi Drop. I found this show very quaint and entertaining. It's about a guy who sort of takes in, I think she's his niece, and he's like raising her as his own daughter, and he's like an older guy. And it's just a nice, cute little father-daughter story. Now, of course, the manga it's based on is infamous for the fact that it later becomes that they form a relationship together. I kind of want to read the manga on that basis. A lot of, like, at the time, I was afraid of the manga because of that. But the anime, of course, doesn't come near that shit. It just ends at the end of the arc of her being a little girl, and they're like, they obviously were trying to pretend like the later half of the manga didn't exist. But, and they made a very cute little show. I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10. It's charming and heartwarming. But, I kind of do want to read the manga now. Next up, Bento. This is the premise of the show is incredible, because the idea is that it's a show where every day at the supermarket there's a certain time where someone puts all the on sale stickers on the bento, and when that happens, everyone in the store just bursts out into an epic war to get the bentos, and they all just beat the shit out of each other, and it's fucking hilarious. And like the action scenes, like the action choreography and animation in this show is fantastic. Like it's a really fun watch, just people beating the living shit out of each other over food, which I of course appreciate as a big food guy. That this show should have actually been called Food Wars, but in any case, it's a fun time, but like the actual content of the story is pretty stupid. The characters aren't all that interesting. It's kind of got like a bit of a harem love triangle thing going on. It's a little too light novel-y. So like it, it's fine. It's not a great show, but I watched all of it, so I'd give it a 6. Working season 2, I feel exactly the same as I did about Working season 1. I literally just watched it because I was watching it with my brother. And season 2 is where it really started like weighing on my soul, where I was like, oh my god, I can't believe we're still watching Working. Ungo. This was a weird one. This is a sort of, I guess I'd call it a police procedural, but with a weird fucking twist. It's based on an old Japanese novel from like the turn of the century, but like the 18 to 1900 turn of the century, but it's set in the future. Like they made a sci-fi version of the story, and it kind of feels like they were going for like a Sherlock thing where it's like a pretty boy detectives, and it's kind of trippy and weird, but like it was too trippy and too weird. It didn't make any sense, and then it wraps up in a really bizarre way and goes like way over the top. I thought it was alright. It was one of those things I was kind of watching it just to see where it was going, but I never ended up being that invested in it. I'd probably give it like a strong 5 to a light 6. Somewhere thereabouts. Next up, Therma Roma, which I'm not even sure I actually did see all 3 episodes of, because like the way that this was listed on Mal for a long time was really confusing. But this is a fucking hilarious concept and execution of concept about a Roman bath inventor who like passes out in the bath and wakes up in Japan in a Japanese bathhouse, and he learns all this stuff about how baths work, so that when he goes back to ancient Rome, by the way, when he goes back to Rome, he then implements the stuff he's learned from Japanese bathhouses. So basically, this is Japan taking credit for the innovations in bathing that Rome had inspired in them. I don't know. It's fucking weird and hilarious. And yeah, I remember it being really funny. I'd probably give it like a 7 or 8, but it's very short. And I've never read the manga, which goes on for a lot longer. But yeah. So as you'll notice here, suddenly there are scores for everything. And that's because, obviously, if the shows are in order of when they were added to the website, then after 2014, they're all going to have scores, because that's when I started giving scores. So anything I've seen past that year is going to have a score on it. So basically, I think all of the rest of the anime that I have. In fact, I think that's why Therma Roma was so deep in there, is because they had to relist it because the original listing was like fucked up for whatever reason. But yeah, so I scored basically everything else. If you want to see those scores and read why I gave them those scores, you can go to my Mal. But now we're jumping right into OVAs, baby. So, Rurouni Kenshin Suiokuhen. This is one of the greatest OVAs of all time, known as Samurai X Reflections in its American release. It's the backstory to Rurouni Kenshin, which originally is told in the third major arc of the manga, but the anime adaptation never got to it. The anime adaptation had a filler arc that was so bad nobody wanted to watch the show anymore, and it got canceled before they ever adapted the final arc. But thankfully, we got this beautiful, artfully made 4-episode OVA that is really violent, really dark, and really fucking moving. And it's just this kind of brutal samurai tale of like this kid, like Kenshin, who's fucking, his parents die and he's sold into like slavery, and then the caretakers he had and the slaves all get killed by bandits. He's taken in by a swordsman. He's trained to be a fucking killer, and then he ends up joining the military and just being like a fucking murderer for hire in the military. Kills fuckloads of people, falls in love, has a very tragic romance, and this is what eventually makes him into the man that he is at the start of Rurouni Kenshin. But this is by far the best part of Rurouni Kenshin, is this 4-episode OVA. It's the best thing to come out of the whole franchise. Yeah, it's good. You should watch it. I'd probably give it an 8 or a 9. I don't know which. Mobile Suit Gundam 0080 War in the Pocket. This, likewise, is one of the best Gundam stories. 6 episodes of a really tight, heart-wrenching story of some characters who get mixed, like basically characters who become friends while being on opposite sides of the conflict and not realizing it. A kid who's sort of the intermediary between the two, a romance on the battlefield, lots of misunderstandings, characters who, you know, never know what really happened that day and why their friends aren't there anymore. And just some pretty deep themes that I don't remember. I know I wrote a big blog post about it back in the day, but 0080 is fucking great. I honestly would recommend this as your starter Gundam. Like, it might be a little difficult to understand, like, the jargon, because it takes place in the middle of, like, the conflict that is happening in the original series, but, like, ignoring all that, this is the best, like, emotionally punching story that you will just get, and it's only 6 episodes, so, like, I think this is a great starter Gundam OVA. It was one of the first ones I watched, and I fucking loved it. Jing the King of Bandits in Seventh Heaven. This OVA is much better than the Jing TV series. It's entirely adapting just volume 4 of the manga, I believe, which is one where it's a full volume story about Jing getting trapped in this prison that's supposed to be the most inescapable prison. And in this prison, you also go into like a sub prison within your mind and in your dreams and shit, and it's a trip. And this OVA just better captures the feeling and spirit of the original manga, which Volume 4 of Jing was kind of when Jing got a little bit more serious, when his character, like, the story got less goofy and his character was a little bit more stone-faced, so it fits, like, the character in the manga matches the version in the show a little better. But also there was more production value, and it's just overall a better quality version. So I'd say that even if you never watched the Jing TV show or read the manga, Jing in Seventh Heaven would probably give you the best idea of, like, a taste of what's good about the series. And, you know, every Jing story can pretty much be taken standalone, so if you're interested in it, check that out. Gatekeepers 21, this is an OVA. Oh, and I'd probably give Jing in Seventh Heaven like a 7. Just because I still think the manga's better. Gatekeepers 21 is an OVA that I have had a long-standing interest in, because I remember seeing, like, the last 2 episodes on Tech TV when I was, like, 12, and thinking they were cool as shit, but having no idea what was going on. And I rewatched it a few years back, and I really liked the main character and the general tone of the series. It feels very like Boogie Pop. It's like from that era, and it's got that kind of attitude, this dark urban fantasy with some heady themes to it. But It's not an amazing show. I'd probably give it like a 7 out of 10. Um, Again, this is another one I wrote a big long blog post about back at some point. So, but I don't remember what I said in it. Record of Lodoss War. I think this show is overrated as fuck. And I understand why. It was like the OG Dungeons and Dragons style high fantasy anime, and it's beautiful to look at. The character artwork is phenomenal. The animation's really solid. It's it's a 13 episode OVA, so like every episode feels like a fully produced thing, but like it's just really generic boilerplate fantasy that I don't find entertaining to watch at all. It does gain more of a political narrative as it goes on, and I remember because I watched the whole show when I was like 13, but I rewatched a few episodes like a couple of years ago and hated them. I remember it having like some peaks of interest along the way, but like it just the baseline of it, like the characters are just totally generic fantasy characters in a totally generic fantasy story. And I find that impossible to get invested with. I also don't like the directing style of it. Like gorgeous as it is, it doesn't like there's not like beautiful directing, so like the cinematography is not very strong. So I'd probably give that like a 3 or 4. Read or Die, the OVA. I already kind of reviewed this when I talked about the show. It's a really kick-ass spy thriller action story with superpowers that are really unique and distinctive. It's gorgeous to look at. It has cool music. It's just like a rock solid action movie spectacle piece that for some reason was released as a 3 episode OVA instead of a movie. Um, I would definitely give it an 8 out of 10. Like it's a perfect like throw in and go action film. Next up, Fooly Cooly. I've seen this more than I've seen any other anime in my life. I've seen it like 15 times. I wrote my first in-depth analysis about it back in 2009. And I've been meaning to cover it again, but like the last time I watched it was 2011. And what I remember feeling when I watched it was that I had seen it so many times and analyzed it so in depth that it doesn't surprise me anymore. Like watching it, I was just like, yeah, it sure is Fooly Cooly. Like I sure do know exactly what this is. And I was like, uh-oh, this is dangerous. I've seen it too many times too recently. So, maybe my interest will be rekindled if I see it again. Maybe I'll see something new that I was too young to appreciate then or something. Or just find the right angle to, like, analyze it again. Because, like, my analysis from 2009, while it is solid, the way it's written is the way I wrote in 2009. So I wouldn't recommend going and reading it. But if I did it again, I'd probably take a different approach. So, I would like to revisit the series at some point. I would definitely give it at least a 9, if not a 10. It's one of my favorite anime of all time, so I certainly think it'll be a 9 at minimum. Hoshino Koe, or Voices of a Distant Star. This was the first fucking Makoto Shinkai film, the one that put his name on the map because he made the movie by himself. Just a one-man production made on his Power Mac, voice acted by like him and his girlfriend. And it was really inventive and had an interesting concept because it's about this boy and girl who are in a relationship, but she joins this space military, and they're texting each other back and forth. But as she gets farther and farther away from Earth, her messages take longer and longer to reach him, to the point that their relationship's obviously just fatalized, and it's a big tragedy. So yeah, it was a really interesting concept, and like I think most of what was impressive about this thing was that it was made by one guy and that it had a cool concept. I don't think it necessarily is a great film. I'd probably give it like a 6, if that. I think everything Shinkai's done has been severely overrated, and I'm gonna talk about it someday. Okay, Hitsuji no Uta, or what the fuck was the Lament of the Lamb? This is an odd one. It's from I think I read the manga and watched the anime of this, but it's this really like weird fucking manga about these people with a curse, and I remember it just being like boring. It was kind of creepy and weird, but not that much. was mostly just kind of slow and boring. I don't know. It's probably like a 4 or 5. I don't care much about it. Oh man, Iria no Sora UFO no Natsu. This show kind of wrecked me when I watched it. I watched this 10 years ago, and at the time it reminded me, like, I read into it like similarities to an internet relationship I had had, and it was really emotional for me. But basically it's about this guy who discovers like mysterious girlfriend who's like a fucking weird autist girl, as they tended to be in the mid 2000s. And she's like some alien power, like basically she's a broken girl and he's gonna protect her, and in the end he kind of can't, and so it's a big tragedy thing. But like, I don't know if this is good. Like, I liked it at the time, and I remember there being elements of it that were strong, but it was also the kind of thing that like people told me it was bad, and on reflection I thought it probably was. So this could be anywhere from like a 3 to a 7. I have no idea. If at best, maybe it's like Planetarian, like a succinct boy meets girl story with a sad ending that's kind of, you understand that it's coming. At worst, it might just be trash. I don't know. It's been 10 years. Rurouni Kenshin Seiso Hen. I believe this is the wait, this one's Reflection. What was Suioku Hen called in English? I thought Reflection was because, it's the backstory. It was Trust and Betrayal, right. Trust and Betrayal is the great one. Reflection, this is the one that they tried to make a sequel to Rurouni Kenshin that just fills out the details on the rest of Kenshin's life. It also has, like, some kind of random scenes where, like, it was stuff that had just not been adapted from the manga that they, I guess, felt needed to be addressed. So they just kind of haphazardly slapped it into this OVA along with showing what happens for the rest of Kenshin's life, which, people were not happy with, because it's kind of just a downer, and like it seems like it was unnecessary to learn this stuff about the rest of Kenshin's life. Like, some of it's not that cool, and it's like, why did we need to know this? You went too far. We didn't need to know the whole story of Kenshin's life. We happily ever after was fine, So I don't know. That one's probably like a 5 or a 6. I don't remember. I'm not invested enough in Rurouni Kenshin at this point to tell you. Bastard. This is a weird OVA because it starts off really strong. Like, the first couple episodes, well, I won't say starts off really strong. The first episode's okay. The second episode is really cool. But then what happens is, Bastard is a long-running manga. I think it might even still be going. Like, it went forever and changes considerably as it goes. But even at the time, I think they had intended to do like 12 episodes of it, but like the production fell through in places. So as the episodes go along, it just starts skipping further into the story. So like stuff that was being built up is just unresolved, and then new shit's happening. You don't know what it is. And then, like, by the ending, it's like, you literally don't know what the story is anymore. Like, you can't follow it because it's like, what the fuck happened? They skipped around so much. I don't know what this was about. So, like, on the one hand, it's a story with a really fun attitude, cool action. It's a well-made OVA, and it starts off strong, but then it just gets so fucking off track and weird that it's impossible to follow. I'd probably give it, like, a light 6. I still ultimately enjoyed my time with it, but I can't recommend it because of those reasons. Final Fantasy, the OVA, also known in the American release as Final Fantasy Legend of the Crystals. I owned this on VHS. I think I sold it at some point, but it's just not very good. It's a 4-episode Final Fantasy OVA that has nothing to do with any particular Final Fantasy game. It vaguely kind of has elements from the story. I think there's chocobos, like it probably has some of the iconography. At the time, I hadn't even really played that much Final Fantasy, so, I probably wouldn't have even appreciated whatever references there were, but it's it's well made in terms of visual presentation, but the story is completely generic. It's like a boy has to go find 4 crystals and save the girl. Like, it's boilerplate. It's probably worth like a 5. Um, Les Portraits de Petite Cosette. I forgot I didn't watch all 3 episodes of this for the Shinbo video. I only rewatched the first one, but this is one of my favorite OVAs. It is just pure aesthetic. This is Shinbo gone wild. It was the next crazy Shinbo thing after the Soul Taker, arguably the last true Shinbo-gasm, the last show that had no one else's influence on it and was just him going crazy. And that's all it is. It's 3 episodes of trying to capture the feeling of Gothic and Lolita. That was their goal, to make a Gothic Lolita anime. And they did that by making a Gothic horror story mixed with Lolita. And, it's beautiful. It's entrancing. It's dark. It's violent. It's got really interesting use of CG to create horrifying dreamscapes. A great Yuki Kajiura soundtrack. Phenomenal character art. It's great. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10, and that is a pure aesthetic 8 out of 10, which is saying something. It's probably the best aesthetic ever. Puni Puni Poemi. This is a magical girl parody side story to Excel Saga, and if you've seen Excel Saga, you may know that it's known for the incredible fast talking of the protagonist. This kicks that up to another level. This is just non-stop. It's 2 episodes of non-stop wacky hijinks. Just like way off the rails, off the walls. Beautiful to look at. Pretty funny. I remember enjoying it a good bit. I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10. X the OVA. Which one was X the OVA? I think this was like a precursor to the TV show that was just kind of included with the show. Yeah, it was just like included in the box set with the show on the American release, but it's like a prequel episode about these 2 characters who I think are dead at the start of the show, and so it's like telling how they got that way in this OVA, and they're like, I think they were just in love but they kill each other or something. It's whatever, if you don't know anything about X, then just forget it exists. Gunsmith Cats. This is a really great OVA. Pure 90s pulp. Gunsmith Cats is a great manga. I'm a huge fan of it. It's just about like these two girls who are bounty hunters, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. It's all about like classic cars, cool guns, and girls kicking ass, with a 90s pulp flair. Which 90s or 80s pulp, whatever. It's pulp. It's pulp. It's the shit where there's shootouts in warehouses and Russian mafia dogfights and car chases and shit. If you like movies like Trouble in Little Tokyo or something, it's like that. And the prequel Riding Bean, actually, we'll probably get to that eventually because Riding Bean's even better, but I like the characters in Gunsmith Cats more. This OVA, I don't think it actually adapts anything that's from the manga. Like, it's kind of its own self-contained story, unless it's in a later volume of the manga that I haven't read yet. But it's just like a small chunk that's like, not the overarching story of the manga or anything. But it's pretty good. I'd probably give it a solid 8 out of 10. It's not the best pulp, which Riding Bean is, but whatever. Pale Cocoon. This is a neat little sci-fi 1 episode, like short film kind of thing that a lot of people really like, and it's by this dude Yasuhiro Yoshiura, who's directed a bunch of shit like this. I think he's one of those guys who everyone else likes his stuff more than I do. I've never really enjoyed any of his stuff all that much. Pale Cocoon, I remember thinking like, huh. That was like my overall impression was like, huh, all right. So I'd probably give it like a 5 or a 6. I don't know. Short stories that are about like this one sci-fi twist don't usually appeal to me. Otaku no Video, however, appeals to me very strongly. This is a really cool OVA. I talked about it extensively in the old ass anime cast, so I'm not going to talk about it too much here, but it's one of my favorites. I'd probably give it a 9 out of 10. I really love it. Sex Friend. Oh no, we're in the OVAs, which means that all the porn I haven't given scores to is in here. Well, Sex Friend is porn. It's pretty well made. It's pretty popular. Probably because the title is Sex Friend. It's alright. Angel's Egg. Angel's Egg is an art house movie from director Mamoru Oshii. It's one of his, well, it's not a movie, but it's fucking as long as one. I think it's like an hour long or something. It is, yeah, an hour and 11 minutes. So it's basically a film. But it's one of the early Mamoru Oshii works. It's really fucking trippy. It's known for its unbelievably beautiful Yoshitaka Amano art and Shinichiro Kobayashi backgrounds, or Shichiro Kobayashi. I can never remember how to say his fucking name. It's an unbelievably gorgeous film with very little dialogue that's all metaphorical. There was an amazing video recently from Best Guy Ever at the start of his Mia Mafova series where he analyzed the film in depth for like half an hour. And that really helped me to understand it. Because I watched this film almost 10 years ago and I understood nothing. I just thought it was pretty. After watching Best Guy Ever's analysis, I feel like I get it, and I'd probably give it like a 7 or 8 out of 10. I don't know. I'd have to watch it again to know for sure, but it's quite good. And to round out this episode, Writing Bean, since I was teasing at it, it's a really excellent 90s pulp thing. It's like 140-minute OVA. It's a fun, breezy thing you can just throw on and have a great time. I personally love the 90s pulp aesthetic. I love the like car chases and shotguns like aesthetic and just cool dudes and hot chicks with guns. So especially in anime. So yeah, I really like Writing Bean. I think it's stronger than Gunslinger Girl in like the directing and being like just punchy and short and to the point. Did I say Gunslinger Girl? I meant Gunsmith Cats. But both are worth watching. And yeah, I'd probably give Writing Bean an 8 or a 9. I'm not sure. I had to watch it again. But that's it for this episode. I think we'll probably only have 1 or 2 more of these, because all we got left is OVAs and movies. So, yeah. Join me then.